If you've got a set of PM interviews coming up, I'm going to walk you through exactly how you should prepare. We've got 4 main interview types to get through in a product management interview. First one is behavioral questions. The second one is product design. Then we have analytical or execution style questions. And the fourth one is usually strategy. If you are interviewing at a top tech company, then you can expect to have to answer questions from all of these categories. If you are interviewing at a small startup, then mostly you're going to be doing behavioral questions with maybe a few product design and strategy questions sprinkled in. All right, so I want to walk you through how to think about preparation. So the first thing you have to do is solve for the content. Then after that, you layer on your delivery and communication. And then finally, you add the time component, because interviews are always timed. Most people will bundle these all together. They're going to go right into mocks, and they're going to interview, and they're going to record themselves and get their friends to assess them, and then maybe ask a random coach online to give them feedback on this and that. Try to break these into separate components. First, think about the content. Can you actually think at this level, and can you actually write down this information? And then separate issue is, can you deliver it? Can you communicate freely about this? Content and the delivery are separate skills, and I want you to think of them separately. Only then can you talk about the time management component. And the time management component requires a different type of practice, because now you're not trying to figure out how to get the right content. You're trying to do all of that in a short period of time. So what you're really trying to do is improve your ability to act under time pressure. The second aspect of the time constraint is that you're going to need to jettison certain aspects of your answer depending on how much time is left on the clock. So you're going to have to make decisions as you go. Okay, this part I'm not going to get into because I won't have time. And you can even say that to the interviewer. So the main message here is that don't try to do it all at once. So now let's talk about the rubric component, which is understanding what is actually being evaluated for every single question that you get. The first rule of rubrics is that you must ask for the rubric, but don't ask for the rubric directly. Say, what exactly is being evaluated? Do you have an example of what questions may be asked? How should I think about preparing best? You want to be quiet. Let the recruiter give you the information. A lot of times, if it's a bigger tech company, they're just going to send you a list, but sometimes they won't give you anything. And in those situations, you should definitely ask and probe for more from the recruiter conversation. Even when you do get the documents, feel free to just ask the recruiter anyway. You're really trying to determine what is the interviewer thinking about as they're conducting the interview. They have a set of criteria. 4, 5, 6 criteria. We're going to go over some of them later on. And they're going to assess you on that criteria. They're going to use that as a justification to say, yes, we should hire this person, or no, we should not hire this person. Quick reminder, they cannot just make arbitrary decisions. They have to explain within the hiring rubric how the company thinks about hiring. Why did they make a hire or do not hire decision? So now let's talk about a general set of rubrics for these questions. Let's take behavioral first. And just as a reminder, a behavioral question is, can you tell me about a time that you had a conflict? Can you tell me how you manage stakeholder alignment? The interviewers will check for your overall structure of your answer, brevity, whether it's mapped to the values of the organization, and whether it's the truth. You want to be concise, you want to be brief, you want to answer the question, you want to be truthful, but at the same time, most important is to map it to the values of that company. If they execute quickly, if they put the user first, if they don't compromise on the details, whatever their values actually are, go on the internet, find their values. Let's talk about product design now. Product design, again, requires structured thinking, requires scoping the problem space, meaning figuring out where you're going to play for the purpose of the interview discussion. The third element is segmentation, audience segmentation, user segmentation. Who will you work with? And that goes into prioritization, which is the next rubric. How do you make your prioritization decisions? They want to evaluate your user empathy. How well do you think about the users and the user experience? How well do you think about their pain points and their problems? And only then do they evaluate your solutioning. Everything else that comes before is much more important than the solution itself. Nonetheless, the solution is also a part of the rubric for the product design question. Let's move to analytical question. As a reminder, analytical questions are, how would you set a goal and metric for the following product or the following initiative? Or should we build this product for this company? That's the most common type of analytical question. It could also be evaluating decisions, finding a root cause analysis, or other execution style questions. So for those, you're evaluated largely on your structured thinking. Again, yes, this is a component present in all the interviews. Your ability to think about the user value and the business value value and balance both, your ability to set metrics and evaluate which metric candidate is better and why, your ability to explain trade-offs, should we do this or should we do that, and your ability to set other counter metrics to watch out for cannibalization or other negative effects, and product health metrics. The final bucket is strategy interviews. This could be product strategies, such as how do you launch something, how do you update the business model, how do you change the pricing, or company strategy, which is how do we increase company revenue by 3x over 5 years, or how do we expand to other regions. For these questions, structured thinking, then after that it goes really heavy on the business value, how to think across long-term horizons, so multi-year roadmaps and strategic visions, and comprehensive view of the business or product lines, and synergies. So those are some of the things that we look for in a strategy. Now, how do you know how you're doing in all of these? Well, the first way to check is to do a self-assessment. Check yourself. Do you understand the rubric? Can you deliver the content? Meaning, can you write it down? Can you speak the content? And then finally, can you do it all within a 30 or 45 minute time frame? You should do self-assessment on all four for each of these 4 types. But the best way, of course, is to get a calibrated interviewer to actually assess you on these. If you're going for a PM interview at Meta, you've only got one shot every 12 months. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to know if you're actually ready. So with Meta and every other top tech company, the bar is now very, very high. To give you a sense of how this works, usually you'll first go through an initial round of 1 or 2 interviews. This is after your recruiter screen. And then you're going to do 5 or 6 other rounds. So altogether, you're going to do maybe 6 or 7 or 8 different interviews. Each of those interviews, your interviewer is going to give you a score, and the scores range from strong do not hire, leaning do not hire, leaning higher, higher, and strong hire. And in order to move forward, you actually have to receive at least a hire or a strong hire from 1 or more of these interviews. Meta and other top tech companies optimize for a reduction in what's called the false positive. You know what false positives are. They want to make sure that they don't make a mistake when hiring. Now that you know that we need those strong hire or higher recommendations and plenty of them, you know that the bar is very high. The other downside is that if you get a no hire or leaning do not hire, or even if everybody comes back with leaning higher, but there's no strong supporter, the answer is going to be no. And if the answer is going to be no, then in the best case, you're going to be asked to take what's called a 12-month cool-off period where you don't apply to Meta or that company where you interviewed for 12 months. Also, if you do extremely poorly, then you may not be asked to come back at all, and you will effectively block your chances of ever interviewing at Meta again. This happens rarely because you really have to receive bad evaluation from a number of interviewers in order to get this, but it is possible. So keep that in mind. Let's talk about the Meta process. First, there's going to be a product sense and an analytical or execution style interview as your first round. Product sense requires the following elements: structured thinking, scoping the problem space, segmentation of your user in a way that makes sense, prioritization, user empathy, that is understanding the pain and problems of those users, solutioning, and finally metrics and go-to-market if time permits. So one of the first things you want to do is when you're thinking about a product sense question, such as design a parking solution for Google Maps or Apple Maps, or really anything else, you want to do a self-assessment on these areas. For analytical question, there's a few different things to think about. The types of questions that we're dealing with are usually setting goals and metrics, finding a root cause analysis to a problem, picking between 2 options and explaining your rationale, explaining trade-offs, thinking about counter metrics. So for the analytical ones, you want to assess yourself along the lines of setting goals for the business, setting goals for the product, identifying North Star metric, thinking about the user value, thinking about the business value, evaluating between North Star metric, and explaining how you think about trade-offs, and explaining your thinking in general. The third component for Meta or top tech interviews is the behavioral interview. And this involves questions about how you lead, how you align stakeholders, how you manage conflict, etc. And the things that you want to assess yourself on are brevity, relevance, alignment to values, meta values in this case. There's a few areas you need to think about when assessing your readiness. The first one is the content itself. If you were just to write on these subjects, do you have enough to write about? Do you feel comfortable writing about this or thinking about these issues? And question number 2 is delivery. Do you feel confident and comfortable speaking to these things? The content and the delivery are separate things. And then you add the third component, which is the time limit. With each interview, you've got usually about 45 minutes for the whole thing, which includes introduction and some questions at the end. So you really have about 30-35 minutes for the primary interview to take place. That means there's a strong time component. Besides a self-assessment, of course, you need a calibrated interviewer, someone ideally that has interviewed in the past for these tech companies and has participated in giving hire or do not hire recommendations to actually give you what's called a calibrated assessment. Here's some common mistakes that I've seen. See if you can find yourself in any of these. I've watched all the videos. I know all the frameworks. Okay, this is great. I'm sure you've watched a lot of videos. I'm sure you've memorized a lot of frameworks, but I don't think I mentioned frameworks as a component that's being evaluated here. So just knowing the frameworks doesn't actually help you pass any of these interviews. Doesn't necessarily help you with the content, certainly doesn't help you with delivery. It can help you a little bit with the time component. So the idea about the frameworks are they're useful, but you got to actually internalize them. And don't just watch the videos, actually do these exercises. Get some calibrated help to help you assess and understand where you actually are. The second common mistake that I see is I've got a great design intuition. I can build all sorts of awesome creative solutions. That is great. However, you're not really being evaluated on solutions as much. What you are being evaluated on is the problem definition and the problem that you choose to tackle and why you choose to tackle and how you think about it. The third mistake that I've seen, pretty common. I've been building products for 10 years. I think I can pass this interview. This one hurts the most because yes, it will help you to do better in the interviews to actually know how to develop products in real life and have a lot of experience with it, but the skill set is a little bit different, and you cannot just make up for your lack of interviewing skills with your profound product management experience. And knowing both will make you a much better interviewer than someone who's just practicing interviews. But if you don't know how to interview, you're very likely to fail the interviews themselves. And the fourth common one that I get is, got a bunch of offers 4 or 5 years ago for PM roles. I think I've got this. Unfortunately, the economic reality has changed. Pretty much anyone with the title product manager could get an offer in 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic and post-pandemic boom of the product career. That's not the case anymore. The competition is extremely high. And the final case I get is that this role is perfect for me. They're exactly hiring for someone with my background. It does not matter because you have to pass a general interview readiness bar. If you get a no hire recommendation, you're not joining the company. A lot of these preparation frameworks and guidelines are readily available online, including this very video, but you need to do the work and you need to be assessed by a calibrated interviewer to actually understand what the gaps are so that you can meaningfully move forward. Most strong PM candidates need at least 3 to 6 weeks of dedicated prep on this, on just the interview portion, in order to make significant progress in their weak areas. If your self-assessment showed that you're not quite there, what do you do? I recommend you reschedule if you have not already. A lot of folks reach out to us and say, we've got an interview in a week with Meta. Can you help? A lot of time the answer is, I'd love to, but realistically, it's probably going to take longer than that to actually meaningfully change your likelihood of getting a strong hire recommendation. Don't do the interview just because you want to get it over with. Remember, there's a 12-month cool down period, and you don't want to wait 12 months to get your shot again. So reschedule. It is very unlikely that you will actually get a pass in the interview if your self-assessment or your calibrated assessments are not where they need to be. So what preparation plan should I follow? Just follow what we've been talking about. First, work on your content. Get a feel for answering these questions. Imagine that you're solving a puzzle each time. Then when you're comfortable and confident with the content of it, start practicing. Do recordings of yourself, and then add the time component. Don't restrict yourself in that part 2, but in part 3, start putting a time component. Put a restriction that you can only speak for 5 minutes, and you're only talking about this subsection of the interview. You're only talking about segmentation for 5 minutes. You're only talking about problem framing for 4 minutes, as if you're practicing for a sports event. And then the final step would be to get a calibrated interviewer or a calibrated coach to actually assess your performance in these key areas. They can give you feedback of where the gaps actually are. The question that I got during today's office hours is, should I customize my resume or should I apply quickly for a role? Because both of those things are important. We got to apply quickly. But we've also got to customize our resume. What is more important if I can only do one? To apply and get into the next role, I want you to apply to jobs every day. I want you to customize your resume to the job itself, read through the job description to understand what the keys are, then follow up and write or send messages or texts or emails to the hiring manager, to the recruiter, so that you can say, hey, I can solve your problems. Applying quickly is super important because think about how this process works. If you're a hiring manager or a recruiter, you announce a job, you post a new job, and then you wait, and in 5 minutes, you usually will get an application. You look through the application, you're kind of excited. Maybe if you're a recruiter, you're not that excited, but if you're a hiring manager, trust me, you're excited. You look at this application and this person doesn't align with anything that you need. And then in 10 minutes, you get another application and it actually does look like this person has the relevant experience or expertise or background or whatever. So you forward that to your recruiter and you say, hey, can we talk with this person? So it got your attention. Then you're excited about that, but then 50 more resumes come in. Now you kind of got already sidetracked with other things that you're doing. You already know that you have this person that you're talking to, so you're less excited about checking new resumes. And that's why we apply quickly. We apply quickly because it's obvious that you're more likely to get noticed when you're at the top of the stack than if you're in the middle or at the bottom of the stack. But if you don't customize your resume, if you don't write why I, as the hiring manager, should actually look at your candidacy, why you can solve my problems, then I'm just going to skip. As the hiring manager, I'm just going to skip your resume. We need both. And that was my answer today during office hours is we need both. If I have to choose one, I'm going to go with customizing your resume because even if you apply quickly, but your resume doesn't solve the problem that I have, and I don't think you can do it, I'm just going to ignore your resume. So it doesn't matter whether you apply quickly or not quickly. If it's not customized, it doesn't get the job. It doesn't get the callback, rather. But I also want to qualify here. What do I mean when I say customized? Customized resume doesn't mean that every bullet is customized to the job description that I have. You used my words. I said, you got to do the roadmap and you got to do these skills and those PM skills and deliver those things. And then in your resume, you just said back my words because you told ChatGPT to rewrite my job description. But in the form of your resume, you're so awesome. I don't care. I'm not reading any of that stuff. You know what I am reading? The top of the resume where it says your name, your role, the little summary at the top, maybe 2 or 3 lines where you're saying, hey, I've done things that are relevant and look at my experience, look at my impact, look at my recognizable names. That's what I'm looking at as a hiring manager. When I say customize your resume, I mean customize the top of it primarily. Leave the bottom and the middle of it alone. Don't spend too much time on it. Just make the changes enough so that I, as the hiring manager, am excited about it. I want to give you a call back. I want to chat with you because I think you can actually solve my problem. So I think this way we can kind of have our cake and eat it too. If we customize the top and then we submit quickly, we don't spend a lot of time customizing our resume, then we can have a good shot of actually getting a call back. Hopefully this found this useful. If you're looking for your next PM job inside the Product Career Accelerator, we work with proactive and experienced PMs just like you to help them get into the top tech companies and land their next high paid PM role. If you're interested in talking with us, you can set up a call with our team. The link is in the description. Thanks very much. I'll see you next time.